Well, it seems the traffic situation is not helping matters here, as my guest is still stuck in traffic. But in the meantime, let's look at some of the developments in the agricultural sector, particularly rice growing, as capacity constraints have bedeviled many small-scale rice farmers and millers across Nigeria for years. And despite government measures designed to spur rice production over the years, demand still outstrips domestic supply. Let's watch this.
Thomas Maji is planting rice on more of his land than ever on his farm in Nigeria's Benue State to take advantage of resurgent prices since the country shut its land borders in August. But he says he cannot go much further. With no machinery or irrigation, limited manual labor and no spare cash for fertilizers, the 45-year-old is not expecting any dramatic change in fortunes. His work is nearby, be it hand-harvested stalks on the ground to separate the grains from the chaff.
We don't have tractor. We have not been accessing fertilizer. We have not been accessing chemicals and all that. Even the harvester. We have not been accessing any. So our production is very low. But if those things are provided, we'll have a bumper harvest.
The constraints Maji faces have bedeviled many rice farmers and millers across Nigeria for years. Despite government measures designed to spur rice production, farmers like Maji are getting less from their land than their counterparts elsewhere, and the nation is only minimally less reliant on imports. That's a problem for a government that wants to grow all of its own food and boost the country's agriculture, a sector that accounts for nearly a third of Nigeria's gross domestic product. At Wurukum Rice Mill in Makurdi, Ivere Hassan walks alongside her sister using a loud diesel power generator to drive machinery processing paddy grains into consumable rice.
As we are here, people are buying it and taking it to Port Harcourt, Lagos, and other states. They are not just using it here. So, and the demand, we can't meet the demand because we are doing it, some of the process manually. So we can't meet the demand.
When President Buhari came into power in 2015, he pledged to help the nation's farmers bring self-sufficiency in rice, a grain that has gone from a luxury to a staple for tens of millions of Nigerians. Nigeria's central bank in 2015 banned the use of foreign exchange to pay for rice imports and has backed loans of at least 40 billion naira to help smallholders boost output. It also banned rice imports via the land borders and kept hefty 70% tariffs on rice imports coming through the country's ports. But Nigeria's shelves remained a chock full of foreign rice. In August 2019, Nigeria went a step further and closed its land borders altogether to stamp out smuggling, with rice as main targets.
We have large demand arising from the effect of flood and then the border closure, but more or less less supply. So prices are a bit higher than the start of prices like were in 2017, 2018. So we expect more money in the pocket for this year.
A 50-kilogram bag of rice can cost as much as 24,000 naira, and that's nearly double the price in July, before the borders were shut, and equivalent to Nigeria's minimum wage.
We will reach a point where people who are buying rice can't afford to buy rice. They were looking at other alternatives to get energy or get food on their table. So that's not in the long term in the interest of we, the rice farmers.
In a review of the Nigerian rice industry, consultants KPMG say Nigeria spends roughly $5 million a day on imports, which come mainly from Thailand, India, and the United States.
All right, let's do an opening call to the fixed income market. Let's cross over to the FMDQ marketplace. Ramat Baba, Chief Dealer Fixed Income at FBN Quest Merchant Bank, joins us now. Good morning, Ramat. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
So what was the outcome of yesterday's primary auction, and how did that determine the direction of the market?
Okay, so the outcome of the primary auctions, rates dropped for the 91, for the three maturities to 3%, 4%, and 6.5432%. That's coming from 3.5, 4, and 6.5%. Sorry, yeah. So rates dropped. So what we've seen this morning, of course, there's been demand coming into the system continuously. That has happened in the last few weeks. I think that's in anticipation of maturities today. We have 606 billion of bond maturities coming in today, along with over 400 billion of OMO bills also maturing today. Bond yields have trended down significantly. The 30-year bond is significantly lower, is about 12.15%, and demand continues to come in.
All right, so how is that likely to drive market sentiment for the rest of the week?
For the rest of the week, we expect demand to continue coming in as people look for alternative sources of investment. And of course, not forgetting that the local investors are still not allowed to participate in the OMO auctions. They can only go for either the bonds or treasury bills or the NT bills. But of course, they also have options of investing in promissory notes as of now. So
now the federal government... Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so we still expect demand to continue coming in, and even into next week, because we have over 900 billion maturing for OMO bills next week. So we still expect a lot of demand till probably till the end of the month, as it is.
Now, the federal government plans to issue about $3.3 billion Eurobond. How would that help in the currency market, the Naira?
In the currency market, I don't think that is going to have any major impact on FX. FX liquidity remains low. There's still, NAFEX currently is at about 364.50 levels. There's still a lot of demand for FX, and there's still scarcity. CBN continues to intervene in that market with very little inflows coming in from the offshore guys. So it's pretty much the same. We expect the FX market to remain very illiquid.
Now, going with the state of things, how things are moving now, for you traders, are you people worried that there might be room for for some kind of devaluation on the Naira?
We don't think there will be some kind of devaluation in the Naira. There might be some, because really, the CBN continues to intervene, meeting demand coming in where there is not enough liquidity in the FX market. So officially, we don't expect to be any devaluation. And even at that, looking at the black market, the market still remains, there's still a lot of liquidity in that space.
All right, so how is it really to see any form of devaluation. Bring us up to speed. Yeah, bring us up to speed with the trading today for the currency market. How is the Naira behaving today at the open?
By currency, you mean FX markets, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yeah, the market is still tight. There's still demand for FX in that space. Like I said, NAFEX is at about 364.50 levels. There's still a lot of demand coming in with very little supply. So pretty much is business as usual, everything the same, everyone on the same side looking for dollars.
Just static. Anyway, thank you, Ramat, for your time. Ramat Bader is the Chief Dealer Fixed Income Market, FBN Quest Merchant Bank. And the Bureau for Public Enterprises is targeting a revenue of 270 billion naira for the year 2020. This is as the agency is kicking against the renationalization of the nation's power sector. Speaking at a media briefing in Abuja, the Director General of the BPE, Mr. Alex Oko, explains that what is key in the power sector for now is the full implementation of the power sector reforms.
The Presidential Power Initiative, which we refer to as the Siemens Project, actually provides a credible way to address the challenges in the infrastructure in transmission and distribution. So what this initiative promises is that by the end of next year, end-to-end availability of power will be 7 gigawatts, 7,000 megawatts, by the end of 2021, right? Because part of the challenge in the power sector is that there is excess capacity in generation, there is low capacity in terms of distribution, and the transmission is a serious constraint at the bottleneck, right? So you have about 13.5 gigawatts of power. The power pool now is about 13.5 gigawatts. But what transmission can will is not more than 5,000 megawatts. So every time you try to load the transmission with more than that, that's when you have the systems collapse, right? And then the distribution end, the capacity to distribute is also seriously constrained. So we're trying to resolve all of that mismatch in capacities along the power value chain, generation, transmission, and distribution. So in a seamless manner, by the end of next year, 7,000 megawatts of our generation capacity can flow to end users, so without transmission constraints, without distribution constraints. By 2023, we will scale that up to 11 gigawatts, end-to-end availability of power. And post-2023, we want to scale that up to 25 gigawatts. That's the plan. And it has to be a strategic, concerted effort, not generation doing its own, transmission doing its own, distribution doing its own. At the end of the day, there's no coordination in that power chain. So that's our plan, and I think that we should be more solution-minded than blame gaming. Say this is privatization, no, it's transmission, no, it's distribution. That doesn't help this situation at all. So it's a no-brainer that the provision of the critical infrastructure, whether you're talking about roads, rail, health, those are the social infrastructure, and education, can continue to be funded from the fiscal balance sheet. It's just not possible. It's not realistic. So we have to look as a nation at some creative framework for inviting private capital into the provision of critical infrastructure, period. Whether you're building roads, you're building bridges, you're building power assets, it has to be a public-private partnership arrangement where the public can donate its already existing sovereign asset and have that combined with private capital to produce that infrastructure for the benefit of the people. So clearly we have to go in that direction. One of the key areas that we're looking at this year, you will see the transaction among the, I think it's one of these three, is the reform of the health sector. Now, we're trying to move the health sector from an out-of-pocket arrangement, because so how many people here have HMO, whatever? The preponderant section of our population don't have access or affordability to healthcare. So they usually will resort to, trial or self-medication when they have issues. Because if they need to go to a hospital, they'll have to, a quality hospital, they have to pay out of their pocket, right? For those who don't have HMO. Now, how about having an arrangement, a situation, for example, like the NHS in the UK, where you have quality healthcare delivery facility available to everybody? Because whether you're poor or you're rich, nobody invites illness upon himself. Nobody, well, apart from lifestyle issues, but nobody says, I want to go and get cancer, or I want to go. So if you have such medical issues, you shouldn't then be consigned to the fate of your resources. No, I think that as a nation, we need to move into being able to provide healthcare, quality healthcare for all. So is that approach that we're taking as far as the reform of the healthcare sector? So that's one of the sectoral reforms, apart from the education that Amechi talked about, that we're pursuing this year. And we've moved that needle very, very far. We're in serious collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Health. We're engaging with all of the stakeholders, essentially to implement the health sector reform. So both from budgetary provisions, so if you look at the in terms of ratio, the percentage of the spend of the allocation of to the health sector, basically driving administrative issues, salaries, overheads. None of it is going into clinical or medical facilities per se. So we want to be able to invite private sector capital who will bring in the equipment, set up the hospitals, and be compensated for each of the medical or healthcare delivery that they render. And we've also been able to identify a whole range of revenue sources to compensate the hospital for that. So government pays, private sector provides, the public enjoys it free of charge or with minimal. So that's the whole idea. And for us to put that framework in place, you need to spend money, but there's no direct revenue inflow. But the social good that it creates, trust me, cannot be quantified.
Alex Oko, Director General of the Bureau for Public Enterprises. Well, the federal government of Nigeria says, more than ever imagined, it is determined to create the right environment in terms of policies and guidelines that will galvanize massive investment in the country's oil and gas space. The Managing Director of the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation, Nele Kyari, made this declaration at the Petroleum Summit, just concluded Petroleum Summit in Abuja. He explained that energy transition will not necessarily be a swift shift to renewables, considering the huge number of homes in Nigeria that require fossil fuel.
Anyone and everyone who has a thing to do or is associated with the oil and gas sector within the country and globally endeavors to make a representation here at the Nigeria International Petroleum Summit. So, operators, experts, regulators, bankers, insurance, lawyers, and many more converge to discuss the industry and take positions. Nigeria has declared this year as the year of gas, and it is in direct response to the global energy transition into renewables. But explaining how we will travel, the GMD and MPC makes these remarks.
What we do need today is to transit into getting power to our homes, to our industries, to take advantage of the enormous gas resources that we have here. Utilize petroleum into petchem, into fertilizer, into power, and if you have excess, export it.
Looking inwards at a huge potential that has been somewhat neglected, Nigeria has signaled to the world it will massively develop its gas, consume more of its clean exploration for domestic economic growth and prosperity.
55% of the engineering work on Train 7 will be done in Nigeria. 55% of the procurement that we need for Train 7 will be handled by Nigerian vendors. 100% of all the installation and construction work will happen here in Nigeria.
If we can execute even the 7 critical gas projects in the country, that's a material shift in the whole gas story in Nigeria.
The leadership of the Gas Association couldn't be more excited.
When we're talking about consuming gas, largely we're looking at issues around power. We're looking at gas-based industrializations, the petrochemicals, the methanols, the ammonia plants, and then, of course, all the other types of industry. And this is usually clean burning.
As the plenary continues, certain points resonate. We will create the right physicals for investment. We will industrialize. We will ensure energy security. We will earn forex for more export, and more businesses will emerge for Nigerians and in Nigeria. The world is invited to switch on this. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
We will go to London after the break.